All right, let's dive right into this. Welcome to today's explainer. We are taking on what is, quite frankly, the absolute most consequential trajectory of our time, the rise of artificial intelligence. Right now, as a society, we're caught in this fierce tug of war. On one side, the utopian sky's the limit vision of what AI can do for humanity, and on the other, profound existential dread. So today, we're going to unpack that exact tension. We'll look at the high-level benefits, sure, but more importantly, we are going to zero in on the very real, very serious hazards of handing our human decision-making over to automated systems. Just to give you a quick roadmap, here is what we're looking at today. Number 1, the AI paradox. 2, the promise of autonomy. 3, hazards of automated decisions. 4, the psychology of fear. And finally, 5, reclaiming human agency. Kicking things off with Section 1, the AI paradox, focusing on global governance and public debate. So you've probably noticed that AI occupies this incredibly paradoxical space in our public conversations right now. We've officially moved way past the theoretical into a massive, macro-level civilizational challenge. On one end of the spectrum, we have utopian anticipation, right? The idea that AI has this transformative potential for human welfare, curing diseases, solving complex logistics, optimizing our resources. But sitting right next to it is sheer existential dread, this deep fear of unchecked acceleration and systemic vulnerabilities. And honestly, we are all standing right in the middle of these two extremes every single day. And you can actually see this exact tension playing out right now at the highest levels of global leadership. On one hand, the UN advisory body is urgently calling for global governance to protect human rights and ensure sustainable development, because they recognize that ungoverned AI risks deeply entrenching our digital divides. But then you look at the scientific community, the actual people building this tech. They're out here writing open letters demanding precautionary pauses on advanced model training. It highlights a pretty terrifying gap, doesn't it? The technology is scaling exponentially, like wildfire, but our human capacity to ethically assimilate it, well, that's severely constrained. Moving right along to Section 2, the promise of autonomy and optimizing care. Okay, before we get into the heavy risks of automated decisions, we really have to acknowledge the undeniable benefits. Let's look at a practical setting like healthcare. Step 1 is biomedical data processing. Mechanized systems are just incredibly good at finding early disease markers so much faster than a human doctor ever could. That naturally flows right into Step 2, predictive analytics, which gives us these amazing real-time insights. And all of this culminates in Step 3, which is patient-centered empowerment. It totally shifts the medical paradigm. Instead of paternalism, it actually gives you, the patient, the proactive autonomy to manage your own personal well-being. Which leads us to this incredibly powerful idea. Technology can remove friction from daily survival, freeing human bandwidth for deeper interpersonal connection and self-actualization. Think about that for a second. When AI handles all the heavy computational lifting, it actually acts as an optimizer for our physical and mental assets. The goal is that we can stop worrying about the friction of survival and focus on just being human. But here is where we make the hard pivot. Section 3. Hazards of automated decisions and unchecked development. While those healthcare benefits are absolutely real, uncritical scaling brings us to our core focus today, the severe hazards of automated decision-making. What actually happens when we step back and let machines make human choices? Well, enter algorithmic bias. Machine learning models are trained on historical human data. That means all of our past racial prejudices and economic inequalities, they're scooped up as data points. Think about an AI screening resumes that downgrades female applicants simply because, historically, the company hired mostly men. The system essentially re-encodes our flaws, but then it presents them back to us as this perfect mathematical objectivity. It's a vicious algorithmic feedback loop of injustice. And let's be clear, this isn't just some abstract programming error. It has massive real-world fallout. Critical scholarship points to several primary hazards of automation. First, there's the amplification of racial prejudice and social injustice in high-stakes areas like hiring, lending, and law enforcement. Next is the atrophy of our critical cognitive faculties. Seriously, ask yourself, how much of your daily information intake is curated by an algorithm right this second? Over-reliance threatens our independent human agency. And finally, we're facing the collapse of our information ecosystems. Synthetic media and automated propaganda are fundamentally undermining our shared factual realities, which totally fractures the social solidarity that a democracy actually needs to function. We really need to pause on this specific concept for a moment. Complex moral reasoning is being reduced to optimized computational outputs. This right here is the absolute highest hazard of automated decision-making. When we outsource our decisions to an AI, we aren't just outsourcing math. We are literally outsourcing morality. We're taking nuanced, deeply human ethical dilemmas and allowing a machine to solve them based entirely on hyper-efficiency. When we do that, we are willingly giving up our cognitive independence.
Which naturally brings us to Section 4, the psychology of fear and cultural anxieties.
Let's zoom out for a second. Why does AI trigger such an intense, visceral reaction in us? Well, context is everything. Existential anxiety over paradigm-shifting tech is actually a historical constant. Back in the 1440s, the printing press sparked massive panics. Scholars literally feared that having easy access to books would destroy human memory. Then, in the 1780s, the industrial loom triggered all this anxiety about physical obsolescence and losing jobs. And now, the 2020s bring us artificial intelligence. The point is, every single major leap forward brings a wave of dystopian panic. But I will say, our current moment feels entirely different from the printing press or the loom. And here's why. Historical fears were primarily about physical obsolescence, right? A machine taking over mechanical manual labor. The AI fear, however, is the dread of non-human cognitive systems outperforming their creators in domains we thought were uniquely ours: art, reasoning, language, decision-making. AI introduces a completely novel psychological frontier, cognitive displacement. It forces a full-blown crisis of identity, which is exactly why fatalistic thinking is so incredibly prevalent right now.
All right, final part, Section 5, reclaiming human agency and the true threat.
To overcome this anxiety, we really have to recognize that this technology is completely malleable. AI itself is not going to wake up and destroy humanity. Algorithms lack consciousness, they lack intentionality, they lack malice. At the end of the day, they are just complex statistics. So the crisis of AI isn't some inevitable machine takeover like in a sci-fi movie. The true threat, the actual root of the problem, lies entirely in human coding and human intent. And that brings us to two very different types of coding. First, you have literal coding. This is what we talked about earlier: software programming infused with our historical biases, leading to those dangerous automated decisions. But the deeper, much more insidious issue is metaphorical coding. AI is basically a mirror. It reflects the values of the society that builds it. Right now, it's reflecting a global culture that stubbornly values hyper-efficiency over empathy, transactional utility over social justice, and data extraction over love. It's the dry, mechanistic worldview dominating our culture that makes AI dangerous, not the code itself. Which brings us to the ultimate question. As we continue to integrate these incredibly powerful systems into every single facet of our lives, will we realign technological progress with a humane ethos? Will we use machines to manage external complexity while fiercely protecting our internal consciousness? Or are we simply going to surrender our human agency and our decision-making to optimization? AI can absolutely elevate the human condition for sure, but only if we actively choose not to be diminished by it. So think about it. How much agency did you hand over to an algorithm today? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.